A recently released section of the current federal lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs is what you are about to hear. As of now, on the 9th day of the trial, Rihanna Fenty made her first appearance in any public file, interview, or article related to the case. One sentence murmured in court, a retrieved letter, and a sealed deposition. She was aware. She looked at the list. There was silence in the courtroom. An order was requested by the judge. As if the walls themselves had been holding their breath, the gallery pressed forward as the prosecution moved toward the bench. The name was read by the clerk. Fenty, Ms. Deposition submitted. The date is June 3rd, 2023. Examined in chambers. Accepted as proof. The testimony was not given face to face. A formal statement had been prepared by Rihanna's legal team, sealed, notarized, and redacted in multiple locations. The core, however, remained unaltered. Judge, counsel, proceed. Exhibit 19A, an archive related to Rihanna's early career, was presented by the prosecutor as she stood up. The date was March 28th, 2009, only a few weeks following her well-publicized personal tragedy. I said no, the headline declared. It did not sit well with him. The courtroom went silent. Rihanna writes, "They told me it was just a party, an after-hours event for industry leaders and artists. Someone I trusted extended the invitation to me. I did not inquire questions. However, I ought to have." She described how she got to the place, a private estate close to Encino. Approximately 12:40 a.m., a stylist and a junior representative were with her. At the gate, phones were confiscated. At the door, signatures were needed. The guest clearance confirmation document was marked. The woman who greeted me is someone I recall. She had on gloves. The scent of bleach and perfume filled the room. No cameras were present, only music. The lights are red, and there are eyes everywhere. The gallery remained stationary. According to Rihanna's letter, she was led into a room that was not the same as the rest of the house. Diamond Soy's cold. No furnishings, just people standing in silence, awaiting anything. She wrote that there was a clipboard. I gave it a quick look. It has names on it, initial names. Others have stars beside them. The third name on the list was mine. It was not signed by me. Minutes afterwards, she added, "A male who was not identified in the letter entered. You do not have to do anything you do not want to do," he remarked with a smile and a handshake, "but you will not return if you leave now." She departed at that point, saying, "We are going." I turned to the woman who had brought me. Now she did not dispute. She merely gave a nod. She remained silent in public. No interviews. Do not tweet. No casual remarks. So far. The prosecutor went on to read the deposition again. I did not mention his name. However, everyone was aware of whose home it was. "Stay with me that night." I reported what I observed to my manager. "Then do not talk about it," was his sole answer. The last paragraph by Rihanna. It was gently read out loud, word for word. Years later, on that list, I noticed the name of another girl. She stayed, and she is gone now. Although I regret not bringing the list with me, I did. I simply accepted the terror. The prosecutor looked up and stated, "We offer this not to accuse, but to substantiate what the industry has long denied," before the court called for recess. She was aware. She caught sight of it, then she took off running. As a reminder, it takes hours to piece together each deleted tweet, fabricated statement, and public relations cover-up. When the courtroom returned after break, no cameras. Do not whisper. Only the shuffling of papers and the snick of the prosecutor's shoes as they re-entered the room. Prosecutor. Next up is the supplemental affidavit that was provided to back up Ms. Fenty's initial deposition, dated 14 April 2023. This time, a former assistant of Rihanna made the comment rather than the singer herself. In court filings, it was redacted and just designated as AR Rihanna, and this woman collaborated from 2008 until 2012. In the closet first. Coordination. Next, a quick look at personal logistics and travel. There was only one line in her statement. I invited her. I have never been able to forgive myself. It was introduced as Exhibit 19B, the original 2009 Kinta Twanfe's C9. Invitation to the so-called Creative Energy Reset scanned. Private guests only, hosted by S. Combs. According to AR's declaration, it was written on parchment with only initials and a signature line. No branding or trademarks. What it was, I had no idea. Someone at Bad Boy's media office handed me the envelope and instructed me to give it to Robin directly. They described it as a music salon, a secure setting where musicians could relax and socialize. She added that she was different. quiet and tense after returning from that night. The following day, she requested me to inform the media that she was ill. She refused to even meet my gaze. Up until 2014, there was a 5-year hush. Things took a turn at that point. The first wave of Fenty collabs had just been launched by her. Pressure was present. New collaborations, large fashion houses. The email arrived at that point. It came from an unfamiliar contact, just a message with no subject line. We recall every detail. Do not change the past. You were present. The email featured a picture of the clipboard from the 2009 event rather than Rihanna. It was the identical one she had written about. They introduced and sealed Exhibit 19C. However, the court verified that the picture was authentic, except for one Fenty AR who panicked. The names were hazy. She sent the email to Rihanna's staff and instructed her to disregard it legally, but she chose not to. Rather, she pulled out a notebook she had saved from those years and underlined one of Rihanna's 2010 journal entries. She had never shown anyone that page. "The night they tried to brand me" is the title. According to Rihanna's writing, it was like entering a room where everyone had already determined your value. To them, I was not a person. I was a body, a product, and a chance. I was expected to comply or go away. This was never simply about a party, the prosecutor said quietly as he looked up. An initiation attempt was made. Before they could finish the script, she fled. The defense raised an objection. Defense attorney, speculation. There was no crime. Direct misbehavior has not been accused by Ms. Fenty. Despite this, the judge upheld the deposition. The prosecutor then explained that she did not just exit the residence as the gallery leaned in. She went with information. They observed her for years because of this. Additionally, the document states that this is the reason Rihanna still travels with legal counsel in attendance at all private functions. Since she noticed the clipboard, the lights caught her eye. She also never forgot what they attempted to force upon her. Once more, the prosecutor came forward, this time more slowly, as though a different kind of delivery was required for what followed. Exhibit 19-D was introduced by them, an audio recording that Rihanna's legal team presented with the label Exhibit Only, not for replay, in a courtroom. The transcript, however, was read out loud. The June 12, 2015 recording was taken from Rihanna's voicemail archives as part of a separate privacy violation lawsuit. She did not answer the phone. The number was unfamiliar to her. She did, however, save the message. It was a man's voice. Unlisted, calm, American. On one occasion, you left early. Avoid leaving aloud. Those who stayed did not all regret it. A few of us succeeded. She was then instructed to stop saying "red" by a second, muffled but distinct voice in the background. She does not say it. A startled courtroom sat. The judge mandated that the entire audio be sealed. However, the blow had already struck. Prosecutor, the call was never answered by Ms. Fenty. However, 6 days later, she wrote the following statement in a diary entry. They displayed it on the screen of the court. "It begins there if I disappear." That space, that list, that smell. Next, Exhibit 19E was presented by the prosecution. A sealed text message thread with a well-known music producer's name removed between Rihanna and the artist. From 2016, Rihanna had inquired about going to a tribute event connected to an industry reunion in one of the conversations. "If you are invited, it is not for your music," the producer retorted. "Do not wear red, please. Additionally, avoid using the word. They will believe that you are attempting to call it out." Red illumination had been noted in Zendaya's deposition the previous day. The red room had been described by Cassie. Rihanna has her own now. The same color-coded danger in a different form. The producer was not identified by the prosecutor, but verified that they were listed as government witnesses for a potential future test. On the back of a travel ticket, Rihanna had penned a note to herself. Exhibit 19F has been entered. "I was not only afraid, I felt embarrassed. I feel embarrassed that I approached the machine so closely. I regret not warning anyone else. No letter was ever sent. It was tucked into a bag for makeup, found by her archival staff in a storage room in 2022. According to her attorney, Rihanna's decision to testify was ultimately prompted by that note, even though it is only on paper, because she was no longer the only focus. I thought I had gotten away. I thought a former celebrity stylist who collaborated with Rihanna on several foreign tours made this statement. The title of the document was simply 2013 Milan. The stylist, whose identity has been withheld, talked about a chat they had with Rihanna as they were getting ready for a European red carpet trip. Suddenly, she asked if I had ever heard of the list. I assumed she was referring about label want lists, heat lists, or paparazzi. "But what does it imply if your name has a star next to it?" she inquired. He was unaware. "A picture of a box, not a person. The photo was taken in 2020 while Rihanna was staying at at a hotel in London for a commercial shoot for Fenty Skins. There was no marking on the box. There was a single black velvet glove, a red candle, and a mirror within. Not a word, no sender. Initially, you would have looked great with only a printed badge that stated. When staff came, the package had already been taken out, but security reported the occurrence. Although Rihanna did not publicly address it, her team acknowledged that she requested to change hotels that evening and postponed all of her performances for the following 48 hours. Then the prosecution appeared. The Exhibit 19I is the jury, a 2021 private voice memo that Rihanna recorded and gave to her legal team in confidence. People think the worst thing that ever happened to me happened in front of cameras, but it didn't, she writes in the post. That room was the worst thing, that list, that odor, and being aware that my voice was not invited. The courtroom could not forget what she stated next. They wished for me to stay. They wanted me to change. They desired to change who I was, and I declined. That was where the prosecutor concluded the portion. Because there was no need for an explanation, Rihanna had not simply stayed away from the device. She had turned it down, and it never ceased attempting to punish her for it after that. As the next item was shown, the courtroom fell hushed. It was not a letter this time, not a voicemail, not even a picture. It was a calendar for tours, handwritten, personal, recovered from the anti-tour rehearsals in the early 20s and 16s, using Rihanna's backup wardrobe trailer. Track days, blackout days, internal only was the title of Exhibit 19J rehearsals. Fittings, location scouting, and other events were listed on the calendar. Some days had a little X next to them and were circled in red ink. In their declaration, Rihanna's tour manager responded to a question about what those red X's represented. Our markings were not those. They were not written by me. She did not either. The court was then taken aback when Rihanna's legal team made a shocking revelation. A man Rihanna did not recognize approached her backstage on April 3rd, 2016, one of those red X days. Security was not him. He was not employed. However, he was wearing a Bad Boy Records credential. Who is he? She asked. I am only here to check the lighting, he reportedly responded. A special visitor window is about to open. He left and vanished into the loading dock when she persisted in her questioning. He was never discovered by security. Nobody was able to verify who had authorized his badge. Exhibit 19K, a backstage report submitted the following day, was subsequently shown to the court. Although there was no theft and no unapproved staff breach, the staging was altered. They had unplugged a backup microphone. During a particular cue, one of the floor lights had been moved so that it faced her squarely. That signal, she played part of her set in red light only. The internal record of Rihanna's team was read by the prosecution. Robin asked that cold tones be used in place of the red light sequence and that there be no more red spots. The next emotional blow followed. On the evening of that hack, Rihanna had composed a private voice memo to herself. See Exhibit 19L. Access is still available to someone who believes that the Ligeti system still applies to me. I am not. I went out. They keep trying to remind me of what I left behind. But why? After pausing, the prosecutor turned to face the jury. This has nothing to do with fame, prosecutor. It has nothing to do with music. This is about a group of people who think you are a part of them as soon as you enter that door. Forever. Rihanna did not simply leave a residence. She left a machine behind. However, the machine continued to follow her. The courtroom was no longer erupting in murmurs or gasps. All they were doing was listening, because one thing became clearer with each successive show. There was no coincidence here. This was a trend. Once again, the prosecutor took the stand with Exhibit 19L, a redacted transcript of a phone conversation between Rihanna and an unidentified female artist. Under the description, I had to try one more time, Rihanna's legal team voluntarily provided the call, which took place in July 2020. Although the artist's name was obscured, the court verified that she was on Diddy's previous mentorship roster, someone who had not put out any music in more than 10 years, someone who was no longer in the spotlight. I recall phoning her. In her follow-up affidavit, Rihanna stated that it took weeks to obtain her number. She said, "Do not use my name." As soon as she finally responded, "Not right now. It sounds like a last warning in the transcript. You were there too, Rihanna, weren't you? Unknown? Yes. Why did not you ever say anything, Rihanna? Unknown. Since I did not depart." Unknown was the next line that caused the judge to recoil. "On the first attempt, I gave up." "You didn't. They continued to try to get you back because of this. Slowly, the prosecutor set down the document, then looked at Exhibit 19N, a production correspondence from a global streaming service verifying that one complete segment was edited out of Rihanna's 2021 Fenty documentary prior to the final cut. Industry Control, The Cost of Saying No is the title of the segment. It had been directly recorded by Rihanna. She came up with the idea. She talked about how becoming famous had seemed more like a tether than a launching pad. However, she was informed that the video was too disruptive to the company identity just days before final clearance. In her deposition, Rihanna stated, "I did not argue. Since I understood it had nothing to do with my brand, I simply urged them to stop. Theirs was at issue. 19-0, a 2022 contract from a multinational fashion brand that offered Rihanna one of the biggest licensing deals ever given to a female artist, was the segment's last display. However, there was a last clause. Before being released, all public remarks about prior industrial experiences, particularly those pertaining to private gatherings or mentorship programs, must be examined, approved by both parties." What did she say? It is not business. Ownership is that. She turned down the offer, and Rihanna passed up a multi-million-dollar opportunity for the first time since her debut album. She refused to be handled, not because she could not manage it. The prosecutor shut the file folder. They attempted to buy her quiet. The red lights were attempted to be eliminated. However, she recalled every detail. The gallery remained stationary because accusations were no longer the focus of this. It was about the cost of surviving the silent combat that goes on beneath every stage light. The prosecution brought one last binder back. It was not dense, only a handful of exhibitions. But this is when she stopped running. The prosecutor murmured softly into the microphone. An appearance slip from an ultra-private event held in late 2022 that was canceled is seen in Exhibit 19P, a Combs global sponsored industry gala with no press or journalists. The core idea: tradition, devotion, and luxury. The headliner was supposed to be Rihanna, not for a show, but for a brand presentation and unexpected homage. She did not confirm. However, a former production assistant smuggled her name onto the official printed run of the program. Her team sent out a notice of withdrawal via email the night before the event with no explanation, but she had told her security on the inside, "It is capitulation, not networking, if I enter that room." A page from her personal journal had been taken out. Folded, weathered, no date. There are only 5 words scrawled at the top. The court clerk reads this out loud if you are reading it. "I did not want my departure to be remembered. I wanted my refusal to stay to be remembered." She talked about the years that followed that 2009 evening. The clipboard, the invitation that was not actually an invitation, the red chamber. I made an effort to bury it. Underwork, beneath the spotlight, under international tours and scent launches. But it returned every time, in the cues of the lighting, within the NDAs, in the unforeseen emails, in the presents left in lodgings. Then came the section of the letter that had been recreated in her handwriting underneath the portion that had been crossed out in black ink. Clearer, more positive, crossed outside. I feared what they would do to me. Rewritten. I feared what I would become if I continued to allow them. The last line follows. I did not escape unscathed. The door was still open for the next girl to run, so I left. If there were any more queries, the judge asked. They weren't. That concludes the courtroom transcript. No last thoughts, no cheers, just the clerk's brief note. The witness has finished. The jury was asked to consider the nature of silence as well as spoken words. The true significance of Rihanna's narrative lies there. Due to the fact that she never stood at a podium, in front of blazing cameras, she never gave names. She never threw a tell-all book or sobbed into a talk show couch. She did nothing except waited for the appropriate moment.